Assalamu alaikum everyone, we are from Group Delta. Today we are going to be presenting about Romanticism and transcendentalism as a reaction against the modern age. Romanticism is a literary movement that occurred in the 18th and mid-19th centuries that embraced nature, human values, and feelings. It can be seen as a reaction against the Age of Enlightenment that promoted logical thinking and collectivism rather than individualism. There are poets who continue its extension like Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman, who are called the transcendentalists that coexisted in the modern period. In our video, we will share the influence of the modern era on romantic and transcendentalist poets through their poetry. The first poet I'm going to be talking about is John Keats. John Keats was born in October 31st, 1795 in Moorgate, London. Despite only having his work in print for 4 years prior to his passing, he was one of the major figures of the second generation of Romantic poets. Along with Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley, he was one of the most well-liked English poets by the end of the 19th century. Sensory imagery dominates Keats' poetry, especially in the Ode collection. His poems and letters are currently among the most read and studied works of English literature. Keats emphasizes these romantic ideas, the strange, the sensual, and the romantic, using a variety of poetic devices and themes. His odes all stand out as the best of all due to their sensuality and imaginative depth. Nature and tranquility are idealized in most of his odes. Keats have criticized industrialism and modernism while cherishing pastoral landscapes and used escapism in his poetry. It is his way to disorientate himself from the severe, heartfelt realities of life. He seeks his refuge in the imaginative world of poetry and consoles himself there away from any sort of turmoil in life. Keats was a forerunner of his time in fostering the concepts of an individual's freedom from the limitations of religious superstition and encouraging the authority of spirituality and intellectual development. In the works of Keats, it is possible to find skepticism towards religious beliefs. He constantly criticized religious beliefs, contrasting them with the advantages of knowledge. Following the ideas of the Enlightenment, Keats manifested his perception of religion in the sonnet written in disgust of vulgar superstition, where his negative attitude towards this matter is straightforwardly expressed. It is possible to note the tone of Keats' sonnet. He shows his skepticism to people who are willing to put themselves in the gloominess and horror of prayers, and he also states that those overwhelmed with religion will die like an outburnt lamp, avoiding joy of life and true knowledge. The metaphor of outburnt lamp compares religion's mindset to emptiness and senselessness of existence in the grip of superstition. Keats acknowledged the existence of God, but he did not accept the existence of religious thought. He accepted not the conventional image of God, but more of its archetypical form, believing that God exists on a level of the human psyche. The poet prompted individuality and human thoughts opposite to religious prejudice. Keats neither characterized nor specified how he saw God, but his poems reflect his perception clearer. The second poet I'm going to be talking about is William Wordsworth. He hailed as a Romantic movement's champion in the early 19th century. Its origins can be traced back to Dorothy Wordsworth's journal, where she recalls a casual stroll with her brother, during which they discovered the beautiful daffodil. The poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud is regarded as a masterpiece of Romantic-era natural imagery poetry. William Wordsworth had written lovely poetry full of sweet imagery, usually about the natural world. Wordsworth witnessed the French Revolution, which he initially supported but later condemned. He was a forerunner of the Romantic era in poetry, and his early Romantic poems were heavily criticized as an outcome. The term natural supernaturalism was coined by the 19th century Scottish writer Thomas Carlyle to describe how Romantic poets, particularly Wordsworth, saw the natural world as a spiritual realm. The concept is that heaven descends to earth and becomes a portion of it, and this poem embodies the natural supernaturalism principle. The daffodils here resemble angels and twinkling stars as the speaker imagines the bliss of heaven. He employs Christian ideas and images to create an ode to nature that makes no mentions of God. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud is an outstanding lyrical poem in the form of a first-person point of view. The daffodils are the most iconic symbol in this piece, as they are the symbol of rebirth and pure joy, celebrating the beauty and purity of nature as well as the bliss of tranquility. They are referred to as host or crowd because they are in a group altogether, being a source of unparalleled beauty for the poet hailing from the Romantic era. The poem begins with a symbolic reference to a cloud that is always wandering and lonely. In the poem, Wordsworth explores the theme of nature, memory, and spirituality. These three are linked together as the speaker walks through a beautiful landscape. He finds joy in the sight of daffodils and finds solace in nature. At the same time, Wordsworth delves into the subject of memory. The flowers are there for his comfort both in the present and in the past. Although the title indicates a cloud, the poem is not about one. It is instead about a swarm of golden daffodils dancing alongside the lake and underneath the trees. Wordsworth's poetic persona visited the location at some point in his life, and he describes how he felt seeing those beautiful flowers back then. To characterize his thoughtless mental state on that day, the poet metaphorically compares himself to a cloud. He was aimlessly wandering the valley in the form of a cloud, and his poem expresses the sudden spark that the daffodils gave to the poet's creative spirit. The third poet, Emily Elizabeth Dickinson, was born in 1830. Her family is a devout Calvinist, though she did not go to church, and she chose not to believe in some of the doctrines like total depravity, limited atonement, and pedestrian. Hope is a thing with feathers. It's one of her famous poems. This poem is an honor to human ability for hope. She uses the bird as a metaphor of hope. That is like a bird that perches in the human should forever, and nothing can stop a human from having hope. It is that hope is in a human soul, not from rational and not very logical, nor can be controlled by humans. It came from the human soul and is stronger than one can imagine. Even storms, the chilliest land, and the strangest sea could not stop hope. Her work emphasizes on how important it is for someone to be diverse from society, especially in the population of American society. Last but not least, Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman was born on May 31, 1819 in West Hills town of Huntington, Long Island in New York. Whitman firmly believed that nature was the source of all things lovely. Whether it was the scent of a flower or the light of the moon, anything that was natural had an innate beauty that could in turn beautify humans. Whitman suggests in many of his poems that nature has the ability to both reveal and control a person's inner essence. These natural elements played a significant role in the American Romantic movement, demonstrating Whitman's connection to them. Whitman believed that the enduring industrious natives rather than the pioneers were responsible for the country's essence. The greatest impact on Whitman's composition is supposedly to the Civil War. "O Captain, my Captain." The elegy was written in 1865 to mark the passing of President Abraham Lincoln. It was initially published in Whitman's collection of poems called Sequel to Drum Taps, which was inspired by the American Civil War incident. The poem unquestionably captures the atmosphere of a nation in mourning and has remained one of Whitman's most well-known and frequently cited poems, despite some critics' claims that Whitman repented writing this poem. We must be familiar with the fundamentals of the American Civil War and Lincoln's assassination in order to comprehend the poem. Whitman bases his portrayal of Lincoln's bravery in "O Captain, my Captain" on his ability to keep the Union intact or steer the ship of state securely to port. By studying the poem, Whitman uses few words to produce exceptional visual and melodic effects with a distinctive typographical style, clearly showing the feelings and meanings he intends to express in his poem. In conclusion, we can say that the modern era has greatly influenced Romanticism and transcendentalism in the aspect of religion and spirituality, national identity, and nature. Well, that will be all from our group Delta. Thank you very much for listening.